Brent ran, his mind still swirled with what he had just saw. The ground rumbled, and Brent toppled to the ground. Yet it was no earthquake. He saw a figure moving forward, a giant among giants. His head parted the clouds as he made his way towards the mountains. Welcome to Mythical Phylogeny, adventurers. I'm your guide, Jason. Today, we turn to a being who picked up a fight with the whole pantheon of gods, the Terrible Typhon. Among the horrors of Greek mythology, none are more dangerous than Typhon. He is even one of the possible origins of the word typhoon. There are a few different origins, coming from different periods of Greek history. In one version, Typhon is the child of Gaia, mother of the earth, and Tartarus, the personification of Greek hell, an endless abyss of suffering. In another version, Hera, being Hera, is jealous that Zeus was able to birth Athena from a wound in his head. That's a mess of a story too. Hera prayed to Gaia, and she slapped her hand on the ground before becoming pregnant. When she gave birth, she gave the child to the immense serpent Python. In the last, Hera goes and speaks with her father, the Titan Kronos. He would give her 2 eggs, covered in his sperm, which she would bury and then become Typhon. Typhon is a horror show of monsters, an amalgamation of predators, fire, and poison. He is so tall that his head brushes the stars. When he spreads his serpent-like arms wide, one reaches the eastern horizon, and the other the western horizon. Across his shoulder sprouts 100 giant serpents with dragon heads on his hands. Even more monstrous heads protrude from around his torso. Each of these heads is making noise, roars, squawks, and other such sounds. His legs are like coiled vipers. He has a heavily matted beard, pointed ears, and flames that leap from his eyes. He has dozens of mismatched wings across his back, and he's always described as filthy. He did marry Echidna, a snake woman. Together, they brought forth some of the worst monsters in Greek mythology: Orthrus, Cerberus, the Hydra, the Chimera, the Sphinx, and others are amongst their children. Now, we do notice a few things with the children. Many have serpent-like traits and poisonous or fire powers, a trait which they all seem to have inherited. Typhon, as a person, is described as cruel, ruthless, and wicked. He makes it his purpose to overthrow Zeus's reign. They clash on several occasions, and depending on the source, alters how it goes. In some, Zeus faces Typhon. The other gods are scared away, except for Zeus, Athena, and Dionysus. They remain behind. The last was probably drunk. Athena taunts Zeus, and he goes to face Typhon. He wins using his thunderbolts. In another, Typhon sneaks into Olympus to assassinate Zeus, but is beaten back. In another, Zeus fears Typhon, and he attempts to hide his thunderbolts, but Typhon was able to steal them and hides them away. He then fights and beats Zeus, who is then tied up in a cave with his muscles, sinew, and tendons removed. Typhon doesn't finish Zeus then, but leaves him to return to torment Zeus later. Cadmus, Pan, and Hermes work to return Zeus to full strength. Cadmus tricks Typhon into giving Zeus's sinew after being impressed by Cadmus's skill with his flute, but saying that his lyre is unstrung and needs fine sinew to do so. Finally, the gods were united. They fight Typhon together and win, after a millennia-long battle. In some stories, he is cast into Tartarus. In others, he is buried, and the ground above became volcanic from Typhon thrashing about. It is known as Mount Etna. He is quite the monster. So how big is he? I'm sure you are wondering. Yes, they say his head brushes the stars. But that can't work. If he was that big, he'd be bigger than the whole of Earth. But we do have another measurement we can use. His wingspan. His arms go from horizon to horizon. At sea level, the horizon is about 2.9 miles or 4.7 kilometers away. That means a wingspan of 5.8 miles or 9.4 kilometers. That's pretty big. On average, your wingspan is about the same as your height. So about 6 miles or 10 kilometers tall. That would put his head at the end of the troposphere. Barely fitting. You would think it would be cold right there. But at the top of the troposphere, there is the tropopause, an area of warm air above cold air, but not as warm as ground level. But what about breathing at that height? As you go higher, the air gets thinner and thinner. Hence why those climbing Mount Everest need to bring oxygen tanks with them. But thankfully for Typhon, the troposphere contains 80% of Earth's atmospheric mass. So there would still be air to breathe, but still really thin. For humans, the limit of breathable air is about 20,000 feet, 3.8 miles, or 6.1 kilometers. Much lower than head height of Typhon, assuming that he does stand erect and doesn't crouch, and how much of his tail is on the ground. If he moves like a serpent, then he can get his head into thicker air. But there are other options. I talked about this with creatures like Jormungandr. Getting oxygen around the body can be difficult at extreme sizes. But with all those heads making noises, it tells us a few things. Each of them can breathe and have their own respiratory system. This means that each head only needs to provide oxygen to a percentage of the whole body. This means that we don't need to rely on one supermassive heart to circulate blood, thus reducing the energy demand and the strain of pushing all the blood. Yet, we do have to deal with the weight. His legs are said to be like coils of vipers. This could spread the insane weight over a larger area, but will put absurd stress on the skin and tissue. If Typhon would try and slither, he'd still need to walk. But there are serpents which do. Sidewinders. And some species of adders walk sideways with a J shape. They use it on slick surfaces and shifting sand. It could aid Typhon here. We need to add some sort of padding on the bottom of the tail legs, similar to what elephants have on their feet, but much thicker. Typhon is mentioned having numerous wings, so you are surely wondering if he can fly. In the short answer, no way that is happening. I talked about this when I did the Thunderbird. As the weight increases, the surface area of the wings needs to increase at an even faster rate. Now, we can assume that Typhon weighs in the millions of tons, if not billions. To make him fly, the surface area of his wings will need to be enough to block out the whole sky. A beat of such wings would destroy everything for 100 miles with hurricane force winds. Not to mention, the force of each swing would create tidal waves of blood inside them. No, making Typhon fly without the use of magic is like making a city fly. No, that might actually be more reasonable. I do need to ask how he snuck into Olympus. A several mile tall creature doesn't just sneak about. Chances are that he reached into Olympus with his long arms. But feeding him is another issue. Finding enough food for him isn't going to be easy. A couple of whales would only make a snack. No, he will need to be sustained using divine magic. No way around this. Now, his strength is a lot more impressive when you look at it. Yes, he was killed by Zeus's thunderbolts in some stories, but in others, it talked about taking the combined might of Olympus to fell Typhon, which is more likely. Well, a single thunderbolt won't do much against Typhon. He is the size of a large mountain. No, it will take a lot of power to bring him down. If that is the case, that means Typhon fought Zeus, Poseidon, Hades, Ares, Athena, Apollo, Artemis, Hermes, Dionysus, and even more. But not Hera. She stood out on this fight. Could Zeus defeat Typhon alone? In some tales, yes. Typhon flings boulders, trees, and everything else that he can get his hands on. And with the length of his arms, that is a lot of things within reach. Now Zeus was said to block it and throw them back at him. But that didn't stop Typhon. Typhon even flung the sea to extinguish Zeus's lightning bolts. It would seem that Typhon wasn't easy to beat, and may require more strategies than the classic tank and spank approach most heroes have been able to employ against some of his children. But like his son, the Chimera, we need to approach carefully. Perhaps with enough power, a thunderbolt could bring down Typhon, if we can get it into the perfect spot, namely the heart. Not a strike from outside, but one from inside. Launched from inside the esophagus. Could potentially work if you put enough power in. You would want to use it like a defibrillator. Yes, I know Hollywood movies and shows claim that it restarts the heart, but it doesn't. A defibrillator stops the heart. Hopefully, afterwards, the heart can return to a normal rhythm. But we just want to stop it here. So we need to go into Typhon's mouth. That isn't going to be easy. Remember that I said that Typhon is described as having either poisonous or fiery breath? You'll need to get past that. A blizzard or rain spell may help extinguish the attacks. But what about when you enter his mouth? Yeah, that is going to be hard, but there are other ways. We exploit his size. The larger the animal, the worse it fares in a fall. So how do we knock down Typhon? We stop him from moving. With his huge body, you won't have trouble finding his tail. Freezing the tail-like legs will prevent him from moving, but you'll need a lot of power to pull that off. Most likely, you'll need to gather an army. Thankfully, Typhon's size would surely get attention and make it easier to fight back. But if you've got enough time, you could cover the ground in spikes. Not little spikes, but ones 100 feet high. It'll take a lot of work, but Typhon could just crush them with his hands. Yeah, there aren't a lot of openings. I mentioned that Typhon was tricked by Cadmus's music. This may be an avenue which you can attack. Bring a few bards and have them work their art. Hopefully with some music and charisma you can sway Typhon. There is no way to overestimate Typhon's power. He fought an army of gods and goddesses. You'll need to pull out every trick you know to even stand a chance. But as a mortal, it is best to just flee and allow the gods to do battle. You'd only get in their way. Thus, why I am giving Typhon an undisputed 10 of 10 difficulty. If you see him coming, flee. When Typhon was beaten, he was buried under the ground. The land became a volcano from his thrashing in his fiery breath. This land became unsafe to be around too much, but people do live near volcanoes, so be careful. But if slain, there are issues. A creature of this size will leave a mess upon death. The muscles could rot, doubly so with the poisonous breath spreading over the area. The whole ground around its remains will quickly become an inhospitable plague land. With the remains, you won't be able to eat them. Too dangerous with its deadly breath. You could try purifying it, but probably not worth it. You need to destroy the remains. Don't throw them in the ocean. That will just poison the water and lead to more death. Yeah, there is not a good solution here. Even Tartarus isn't perfect, since Tartarus is Typhon's father in some tales. Send him down to be babysat by his father, who could always release him back into the world. Brent shook as the giant moved forward. It advanced at a speed that he couldn't imagine, let alone match. Dread filled him at the sight. No, this was bad. He felt it in his bones. Could it be the dreaded day? Typhon is a terrifying foe who gave even the Greek pantheon a challenge to stop. If you see Typhon, run. But you'll probably be too slow to escape. Nor would you be much aid in this fight. Thank you for watching, adventurers. Please return next week, where we shall end the year with Ragnarok. Until then, I'll see you on the roads.